Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Bomba. I'm a sophomore criminal justice major here at St. Joseph's University and a member of the LEAD program at SJU. LEAD stands for Law Exploration Advancing Diversity, and it's a collaboration between the SJU Pre-Law program and the Center of Inclusion and Diversity. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Conversations with Interesting Women, where we'll meet our featured speaker, Ms. Doneene Damon. She is a 1989 alumna of St. Joe's, a 1992 graduate of Temple Law, and the first African-American woman to be elected president of a major Delaware law firm, Richards, Layton, and Finger. Ms. Damon has received many accolades for her work in the legal field, including National Association of Professional Women's VIP of the Year designation, and the National Diversity Council Leadership Excellence in the Law Award, and the International Women's Review Board for Excellence in Law. Additionally, she serves as Vice President and Director of Diversity of the American Bar Association Business Law Section Securitization and Structured Finance Committee, and as membership and co-chair of the Sections Committee on Partnerships and Unincorporated Business Organizations. Today's session will be moderated by Susan Liebell, PhD, Associate Professor of Political Science, Pre-Law Advisor, and author. Dr. Liebell is the founder of Global Smarts Mentoring Program, a grant-funded, rigorous global literacy tutoring program that pairs college-level students, mentors from St. Joseph University with middle school students from under-resourced Philadelphia public, parochial, and charter schools. Dr. Liebell appears every few weeks on In Focus, a local public affairs program on PHL 17 to discuss politics and law. She co-hosts the New Books in Political Science podcast, where she interviews scholars each week about their recent work. In addition to this election season keeping her active in the media, Dr. Liebell has recent publications on Stand Your Ground and race. Please join in welcoming Ms. Doneene Damon and Dr. Susan Liebell.
Thanks so much, Susan, and welcome to everybody. I see all sorts of names in the chat, and I'm so excited about this event. Let's start at the very beginning. When did you know you wanted to pursue a career in law? What was the aha moment? What kind of triggered you to go in this direction?
It's such a great question, Susan, because I always tell people I didn't choose the law chose me. And I say that because my parents tell the story that when I was a little girl, I used to talk about being a lawyer. I don't know why. There were no lawyers in my family. There were no family friends who were lawyers. So I didn't have anyone who looked like me, who sort of, set that mindset in motion. But my mom tells the story and laughs how I used to walk around the house with one of her big handbags and call it my beef case. So it's still a lasting family joke. But I often say this was God's plan for me, whether I recognized it or not. I thought, to be honest with you, I was going to be an accountant. In fact, I was an accounting major at St. Joe's in the business school and loved it and really had set my sights on becoming a CPA and really pursuing that career. But this thought of the law continued coming back to me. So I often say I didn't find it, it found me, and that I just allowed myself to follow God's plan for me and I didn't get in the way.
It's funny, I actually hear that from students a lot in the business school who sort of are very, very happy and then have this moment of, actually, I don't want to be an accountant. Let's shift a little bit to your law school experience. Was there a skill you found most helpful in law school, something that's carried through in your work as an attorney?
Absolutely. I'd say a couple of them, in fact. Good organizational skills, I think, is one of the paramount. I found in law school, and similarly, I found in my practice. I've been practicing for 28, almost 29 years now. Having, great organizational skills, I think, is the key to success, because you're never doing just one thing at a time. You're always juggling. You're always prioritizing. And being able to organize your work, organize your approach to your work is critical. I think the other one that I would highlight is diligence. And I can't highlight that enough. You really do have to dig in, and the ability to work hard and be diligent, and as I often say, leave no stone unturned. I think it allowed me to be successful at St. Joe's. I think it also allowed me to be successful at Temple Law School, and it's absolutely been critical for my success in the law firm. No career that we're going to follow is going to be easy. And I'm a true believer that you have to want to do it. And when you want to do it, you do everything that's necessary. And having that ability to be diligent and to focus and to work hard and to dig into the details, and to really not take a superficial approach, but a deep dive approach, is critical to success.
Did you find that that was something that you had coming into St. Joe's and into Temple, or was it something that you developed along the way? I mean, what happened at St. Joe's or Temple that shifted you?
I think it was both. I do think it was part of who I was naturally in many respects. But I also think my education played a huge part of that. I share with young people all the time, it is so important that you choose the right institution, because the school you choose is critical to your growth. It's critical to how you mature. It's critical to the person you become. And so at the end of the day, I think when you choose an institution that focuses on, I apologize, I think my landscapers just arrived. I'm sorry about that. When you focus on an institution that really focuses on the whole person and not just one aspect of you, you develop personally, you develop professionally, and you grow in ways that you never knew imaginable. So even if you had the ability to work hard and you had some organizational skills, when you go to the right school and you have the right professors and you have the right environment, you hone those skills, you develop them even deeper. And that, I think, is what really positions you for both short-term and long-term success.
So you are a path breaker, and I'm wondering how the intersection of your identities impacted your journey through these two institutions and also throughout your law career.
It's an interesting conversation. I have to be honest with you, say I'm often troubled when I am identified as the first, or identified as a trailblazer or a groundbreaker. Factually, it's true in many respects, but I say it troubles me for a number of reasons. One, the fact that in today's day and age, we're still talking about people being the first of anything, is disheartening, because that shouldn't necessarily be the case. And so, from that perspective, I'm humbled by it, but I also feel a tremendous degree of responsibility because of it. Because I really do think if you are the first of anything, you're now laying the groundwork and setting the stage for everyone who's coming behind you. And you have such a greater degree of responsibility to not mess it up. And so from that perspective, it's not really about you. It doesn't become about you at all. It becomes about what you represent and who you represent and how you are preparing people to embrace those who are following you and how you are preparing that next generation to come behind you. So It's kind of a double-edged sword for me because it's true in many respects, but it's also troubling, I have to be honest, in others.
So who helped you not mess it up? I mean, and how has what they did for you impacted what you're paying forward now?
The answer to that falls in a few different categories. I am a woman of faith. And so I always say, it is my faith. It is my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who walks me through my path every day. And I would not be at all where I am if it were not for my faith. So that's critical. My family also, the support of my family, the knowing that I could count on them and rely on them. There's nothing about my journey that's necessarily been easy, but my family has been incredibly supportive, and they have allowed me to accomplish all that I've accomplished. And I'm very thankful and appreciative from that perspective. But I have to say also professionally, I look at every single relationship as an opportunity for me to learn. And I started that process at St. Joe's. And I would encourage all students to do that. I was an accounting major, but I took philosophy classes. And you don't think when you're considering a career as a CPA, that philosophy is necessarily going to be all that helpful. But it teaches you how to think and how to think critically, and how to think beyond just the particular issue that's in front of you, but to think about it much broader, and how the impact of that issue affects people more broadly. And I think that's something that oftentimes schools and programs and individuals miss, because we get so focused on the nuanced area of the career that we're trying to pursue, that we don't focus on this concept of developing ourselves as a whole person. And I think that that's so important for success. Yes, I'm a lawyer, and I'm pleased and blessed that people view me as a successful one. I have wonderful clients. I have a great career, but I'm also so much more than a lawyer. And I hope what I bring to my firm and what I bring to my clients is, my whole self, and not just Doneene the lawyer, but also Doneene the person, because that perspective allows you to see things differently and approach issues differently. And I think that's what your colleagues and your clients and everyone you come in contact with, that's what makes you better, and that's what helps them to understand you and respect you, and helps to set your path.
You mentioned your firm. Let me ask you a little bit. I mean, you've enjoyed a very long career with Delaware's largest firm, Richard Layton and Finger, and you joined them right out of Temple Law School. So what drew you to this firm, and what has kept you engaged across your career?
So I'll answer that two ways. What drew me to this firm and what's kept me at this firm are the people. And I'll talk a little bit about that. What took me to Delaware was my husband. So when I was in law school, I got engaged, and my then fiance worked for a large public accounting firm in Center City, Philadelphia. And he was at a point in his career where he was looking to make a change. And he was deciding between an offer in Delaware with DuPont and an offer in Atlanta, Georgia with Coca-Cola. And we sat down and had a very honest conversation. And he said, I see a life for us together. And when I make this decision, I'd like you to be a part of that decision. So what are your thoughts? And I said, if we're going to have a life together, my life is going to be here in this area because my family is here. And so the decision was we would stay, quote unquote, local, because we didn't want to be that far from family. So that's what initially brought me to Delaware, the fact that he accepted a job here. What brought me to my firm was the people. I had interviewed with a number of firms, wonderful conversations. I had, multiple offers, but I always tell people, go with your gut, because it's not going to steer you wrong. And, I know with any career, you're going to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and you're going to spend a lot of time working with your colleagues. And so for me, as much as the firm was interviewing me, I was interviewing the firm. And the question in my mind was, do I see myself working with these people? Do I see myself happy at this firm? Do I see myself growing at this firm? And so the personalities I met, the conversations I had, and how I felt coming out of those conversations is really what drove my decision to accept the offer from Richards Layton. And it's my colleagues and the people I work with and the clients I represent who've kept me there. You know, life can take you down many paths, and you never know where you're going to end and what path you're going to take to get there. But life is too short to be miserable. And life is too short to spend your time with people who make you uncomfortable and who you can't, you know, be yourself. That was very important to me. And, you know, one of the things I'd like to share with everyone, you know, my interview was interesting at the firm because there weren't any minority attorneys when I interviewed at Richards, Layton and Finger. And so when I was walking through the halls of the building, I didn't see any minority lawyers. There were no minority partners who interviewed me. And I remember one of the senior partners there, towards the end of our conversation, he said, "Do you have any questions for me?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "I have to tell you, I haven't seen any minority lawyers. I've been here for 4 hours and I haven't seen any in the halls. I haven't had a chance to interview with any." I said, "So I'm concerned that maybe there's a diversity issue." And Susan, his response to me sealed the deal. He said, "You are absolutely right. We don't have any. And we do have a diversity problem. And you know what? We would like to start to address that with you." He said, "So let's talk about what that might look like." And I sat back in that moment and realized it was an honest response. You know, he didn't try to hide it. He didn't try to talk around it. We had a very honest conversation around what diversity should look like and what firms should be doing. And I was just honored that he was willing to engage in that conversation with me in that way. And I thought, if this is the kind of person who's at this firm, this is the firm where I want to be.
Have you, that's an amazing story, partly for me, about your boldness at saying on the interview, "By the way, you guys have a problem," and then his boldness in just coming back, even though obviously he wanted you, right? You were part of his solution. And so one approach he might have taken was to paper over whatever issues there were. So that's just so impressive. And it really speaks to everything that you've said has to do with your judgment about relationships and sizing people up, but also sizing yourself up. You have such a good sense of self, both limits and both, you know, your capacities. And it's so interesting that that was kind of like a moment of connection for the two of you. Do you think that there's been a similar commitment to diversity industry-wide that firm president presented to you that day?
It's a great question. I don't think it was on anyone's mind at that time, neither the firm's nor mine, quite frankly, that I would at some point be sitting in a leadership position. So, I mean, I think this is something that's happened over time. I love the fact that I have garnered the respect, quite frankly, of my partners, that they would trust me in this role. And that's really what it is. It's a position of trust. And I'm very thankful from that perspective. But I have to say, I think there's always been, I'll say, a general commitment to diversity in the legal industry. And by that, I mean, there's always been a recognition that it's primarily white male dominated and had been for a very long time. And that work needed to be done to bring more women into the industry, to bring more people of color into the industry, and then to look at diversity in a much more holistic way, not just focusing on race, ethnicity, and gender, but also looking at economics and disability and, you know, all of the various factors that make us who we are. And so there had always been that general commitment. I do think the legal industry and law firms in particular really started to, I'll say, double down on that notion of diversity, quite frankly, when our clients started coming to us and saying, you know, you don't have a diverse team on my matter. And diversity and inclusion is important to our company, and it's important to all of the third parties we work with. And so if your law firm is going to work with us in a meaningful way, we need to understand what your commitment is to diversity and inclusion. And we need to know that you're moving in the same direction we're moving in, that we're not at opposite odds on this issue. And I think the fact that in-house legal departments and general counsel were bold enough to say to the law firms, this is important to us, which means it should be important to you, really kind of forced the industry and the firms to realize that business as usual was no longer acceptable. I say all the time that, you know, it's the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So you can talk about diversity and what needs to be done differently, but unless you're willing to actually start to make significant change and do things differently to get a different result, it's talk, it's not action. And so I think the clients were very critical from that perspective.
That's another, my job, I'm trying to keep my jaw off the floor. You're president of this law firm. Is there anything you wish you knew at the beginning of your tenure that you now know? Is there this thing that you wish you had known before you started all of this?
Well, I tell you a couple of things. So first, I mean, just from the comical side, I wish I knew a pandemic was coming. Because it has been challenging is an understatement to say the least, and we can chat a little bit about that. I think the thing that has been probably most eye-opening for me, and not in a good way, I did not suffer in my firm with issues of discrimination. I did not suffer in Delaware with issues of discrimination. I mean, I basically have been evaluated based on my performance and my character, which I think is what everyone wants. And I've been blessed in that way. I know all lawyers can't say that same thing because they have been impacted negatively as a result of discrimination and racism. It wasn't until I started traveling, you know, outside of my state and outside of my firm in this leadership position that it dawned on me, you know, just last year, that there are still places in this country where seeing me in this seat is shocking to people. You know, having me introduced as the managing partner of, you know, the largest law firm in Delaware, it put some people back on their heels. And I have to say it was a little bit unnerving when I traveled to managing partner meetings across the country, and you walk into some of the conference rooms, and, you know, the sort of eyes look at you with this, you know, sort of bewildered look as if, what are you doing here? And then when you're introduced as the managing partner, it's like, really? And, you know, in one of those instances, I even had an older gentleman, I'll never forget it. When I was introduced, he kind of leaned forward on the conference table and he said, really? You're the managing partner? As if, how could that be? And so, to be honest with you, I wish I had thought more and knew, you know, that I would be met that way and that there would be some reactions that would fit in that category. They haven't been significant, but the fact that there are any reactions in that way is troubling. So the one thing I wish I had known before stepping into this seat is the fact that not everyone would react positively. That even in, you know, 2019, 2020, there are some people who would still react very negatively to me being in this seat.
The fact that he said it out loud, I think sometimes we imagine that we know what people are thinking in their heads. We watch their eyes, we know, we think we know, but they haven't said it, so we can't actually know. That's really a sort of a blunt, very blunt story. Your term as president is 3 years long. What are your goals? What are you hoping to achieve by 2022 when you step down?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I came into this position really with a priority and a focus on two general areas: wellness and professional development. we have been reading and hearing for years about, wellness broadly, mental health in particular. And in recent years, we've started, really hearing about mental health and issues of mental health in the legal industry. So it's very important to me that that be a priority. It is for far too long been a stigma. So when people have suffered with mental health issues, when they've needed assistance in any way, oftentimes they've been unwilling to raise their hand and ask for help because it's always been viewed as a position of weakness, not as a position of strength. So as I became more educated on the issues of mental health, particularly with lawyers in the legal industry, I knew I wanted to make that a priority. This is an incredibly taxing profession. It takes a lot out of you. There are very long days, very long weeks and months and years, and you're constantly juggling and trying to prioritize. I don't like to use the word balance, and we can talk about that, but trying to prioritize your life. And it can become absolutely overwhelming. So I wanted to focus on how do we make wellness a priority in our firm? How do we give people the comfort in knowing that it's a safe place to ask for help when you need to, and that you will be supported and helped in the appropriate way? So that was very important to me. The other piece of it is professional development. I very much view the role of every leader as preparing the next generation of leaders. That is our primary responsibility. As I said when we first started this conversation, it's not about me, and it's not about any individual leader at any point in time. It's about what are you doing with the institution to help develop the people who are there? And what are you doing with the next generation to help them develop so that they can not only be on a path to success, but that they're on a path to leadership success at the same time? So those were the two things that I was very focused on. I have to say the pandemic highlighted for me in ways I never even knew imaginable how important both of those things would be. And so again, I say, the Lord's always leading me, because he knew where I didn't, that this was going to be a point in time where those two topics in particular are so important to so many people. So
I want to ask you one last question before I open it up to the group. And I can see it's such a great group of faculty and alumni and students and staff. Everyone is there. So when you're hiring new people, hopefully, some of the people on the chat, what do you look for in the hiring process? What qualities make for those great associates, and what makes them successful in your firm?
everyone thinks that, the only thing you look for on a resume are grades. And that's not it at all. Are grades important? Yes, they are. It is an objective point of reference that might indicate, and I say might indicate someone's, short and long-term success because they've been successful academically. I am not a believer that grades are reflective of an individual. A grade is a number, it's a letter, it's not a person. And so we look for, the person. We want to see, what are your prior experiences? Do you have any work experience? How have you dealt with challenges if you've had any? How do you connect with people? Are you personable? Have you been able to reflect in any way your ability to exemplify, grit? And many of us have heard that, that ability to really dig in and persevere even when things aren't easy. And so when we're looking at law school students to come in for internships and then for full-time employment, we're looking not only at academics and academic success, but we're looking at the whole person. What have you done in your life that gives you a different perspective that brings value to the firm and to the clients? Are you comfortable talking to people? Because the ability to communicate with clients is a critical, aspect for any lawyer. And, so anyone's ability to communicate and have people feel comfortable with them is critical. and then an eagerness and a willingness to learn and to develop. We all come into this legal field not knowing much of anything. And I tell everyone, law school teaches you the theory of law. It doesn't teach you the practice of law. That's a whole new ballgame. And so we all graduate from law school with a diploma where we have, achieved, a level of success in terms of understanding and learning the theory of law. And now phase 2 starts. Now you're starting your career. You're starting to work with clients. You're in a firm. You're in a law department. How do you take that theory and apply it in concept in a way that's meaningful and impactful? And those are the things that we look for. So it's not one or two or five particular traits or characteristics. It's really looking at each individual, in his or her own right, and what, their resume says, and, what you can glean out of a conversation with them. And do we see them being successful in putting that theory of law to practice, and really being successful with our client base? Oh, you're still on mute, Susan.
Sorry, the Zoom 101. The people who are in the room, please feel free to start adding some questions to the chat, okay? And Susan is gonna the other Susan is gonna bring up some questions and ask some of your questions. So please, I welcome you to put them there. But, as you were talking, I was I'm on the end of it where I'm helping students write these essays to get into law school. And as you're talking about what you want in an associate, it doesn't really sound like a match between what the law schools are asking, or even what the ABA lists as, these important characteristics. This is so different. And what you're saying makes complete sense to me, as somebody who's lived in this world and been in other institutions, but that strikes me as maybe a bit of a problem. Are there particular law schools that you find the kind of people that you're looking for?
So this is an area of opportunity, as I like to describe it. I think for a very long time, there are some schools and there are some firms where the focus on academic success is viewed as the equivalent of professional success. And I think we've learned over time that is not the case. Again, it is just one factor of many that should be taken into consideration. I feel so strongly on this particular issue. I was thrilled when my law school reached out and asked if I would consider serving on the Board of Visitors, the trustee body. And I said, absolutely, because, having been in a law firm for 20 some odd years, being a partner, and now being in a leadership position, I would like to express to the law schools where I think they get it wrong, where I think they're missing some of the critical aspects of what we need in young lawyers. And I think the ability to have that conversation and to communicate, what we know is successful in practice versus the theoretical, sort of concept of what a lawyer or law student should look like, they're not always consistent and they don't always go hand in hand. So I think, the more we can have that conversation and express that to the law schools and the American Bar Association. So it's a huge opportunity for us, and I welcome it.
Oh, that's terrific. I'm going to turn to Susan, who is going to bring us some of the questions that are already turning up in the chat.
Okay, hello. There are a couple questions that have popped up. A lot of people have a lot to say. The first question I have for you is, where do you go for career growth? Do you mention a group of professionals you go to for continued growth to further just enrich yourself?
It's a great question. I believe in being a lifelong learner. I don't believe that you're ever done learning, because if you are, think about that. If you get to a particular point in your life and then you're not learning anymore, I can't imagine, what that existence would be like. So lawyers are required to do continuing legal education in most jurisdictions. So you're required to maintain a certain level of diligence and education and current, sort of perspective on the law. So from a professional perspective, we're required to do that. Personally, I believe in personal growth just as much as I do professional growth. And so I'm constantly looking at and taking leadership classes and communication, CLE classes, and anything that can help me continue to learn and grow and develop. I may be senior in my career, but I have a long life to live, I pray. And so I'm hoping that, there's a lot more for me to learn out there in areas that I'm currently not that up to speed. I will tell you, Susan, and those of you on the call, I shouldn't say always, for a very long time, I described myself as technologically challenged. And so I could do a lot of very basic things, word processing, all of that was not a problem. So the thought of doing everything virtual, that was a little bit overwhelming. But this is yet another area of learning and growth for me. I am on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all of these other virtual platforms with my clients on a daily basis. So an area that, I always thought would be overwhelming and a little bit out of reach for me to really, have some level of competency in, I forced myself to do it because I had to. And so I think we all owe it to ourselves to push ourselves out of the comfort zone, learn things that you don't necessarily know now, or areas that you wouldn't think that you would necessarily have an interest in. And for me, intellectual property and technology is definitely one of those areas.
Speaking on areas, with the changing work environment for a law firm, what areas of professional development do you think law firms should begin to focus on that haven't been done or done enough of in the past?
It's a great question. I think professional development for law firms has often focused on the law. So really making sure people are very well educated in their particular field of law, and that they're very well educated in what's often referred to as business development. So how do you attract new clients and how do you keep those clients? Those are things that we learn to do and things that we continue to develop over time. That to me doesn't address the professional and personal development aspect of it. And so it goes back to one of the things I said before. It's about leadership development and opportunities to learn how to be a leader, what it means to be a leader. There are different types of leaders. It's about self-analysis, getting to learn yourself a bit better, understanding, how you think, what makes you tick and how you approach different issues and problems, and how you can learn from that and grow from that. So I think an area where law firms have not necessarily been as proficient is in that area of personal development and professional development, as opposed to just development in the law or with respect to clients.
Very good. Also, some students have concerns about ways they can show that they have grit and that the law firm or the workplace or the job should select them for the job. What are some ways they can demonstrate that?
So we've all had challenges in life. None of us have gone through life without facing some challenge. And at the end of the day, exhibiting that you have grit is being able to articulate how some challenge that you dealt with in some aspect of your life has better prepared you, or has brought you to the point where you are now and is preparing you for where you see yourself going in the future. And that challenge area will differ for every individual. And so it's taking those things, again, so many people shy away from it because they think it can be viewed as a negative. I don't want to talk about something that was challenging to me because they're going to view it negatively. No, talk about something that was challenging for you. Talk about how you worked through it and how you persevered through it and how you grew from it, and how it's impacted where you are today. That's how you show grit.
Okay, Okay. And you mentioned also mental health. What practices for undergrad students to develop now that would help them take care of themselves as they enter the rigor of law school and the legal profession?
Oh my gosh, it's such a great question. Mental health is important for all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're in school or not. It doesn't matter what career or profession you have. Everyone's mental health should be a priority. We all get overwhelmed. Life is hard. There's nothing easy about it. Life is hard personally, life is hard professionally. And mental health is about how you take care of yourself so that you're in the best position to deal with, the hard aspects of life, both personally and professionally. I tell young students all the time, I think it's so important to know yourself. You know when you're getting anxious, when you're getting overwhelmed, and your point of anxiety and feeling overwhelmed may be vastly different than someone else's. So you can't gauge it by what other people are doing. You can only gauge it by yourself. And what are the tools that you can learn to help you work through that? Sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's breathing exercises, sometimes it's learning skills to help you take what can appear to be incredibly overwhelming and dissect it into smaller pieces so that you're dealing with it one piece at a time and rather than trying to deal with it all at once, because that takes some of the anxiety away when you can sort of take it in a methodical approach. So part of the mental health aspect is learning more about yourself, learning what I call them triggers. I have them, learning what my triggers are, and then learning how to help myself work through those triggers so that they don't become such a big hurdle for me that I can't get over them. And we all have them, they're all different, and we need to recognize it and learn how to deal with it and work through them.
Yes. Okay. This is kind of a more personal question that I have for you, but what advice would you have for people who feel as though they cannot bring like their whole self, whether that be sexuality, race, ethnicity, gender, or even religion? What would you advise for them when they're trying to enter the workplace?
It's such a great question, Susan. This is an issue that comes up often. And it's not limited to the legal profession. You all know this, this concept of not being able to be authentic. I can't be my whole self. I have to be who others expect me to be rather than being who I really am. And if I try to be who I really am, will I be accepted? Will I be ostracized? Will that have an impediment to my career? It's a challenge. And I will say this, I don't know that there's anyone who says they are 100% their whole self in every aspect of their life. But I do think if you're in an environment where you're finding yourself constantly afraid of being you, trying to pretend you're someone you're not for the sake of being accepted, or because you think it might have an adverse impact on your career, you're not in the right place. And that's about choices, and it's about recognizing, what's right for you, and quite frankly, what may be harmful for you. So I never want to give the impression to anyone that you're going to be the same person, every place you go, every hour of the day, every day of the week, because that's not the case at all. When I meet new clients, they don't know me. And so I'm meeting them for the first time. We're sharing little bits and pieces of ourselves so we can get to know one another. As that client relationship develops over time, we learn more about each other. We become more comfortable with one another. Same thing with relationships. But it's the question of whether you're in an environment where you can take the approach of letting people get to know you over time, and knowing as they continue to get to know you that they will accept you for who you are and that they won't expect you to be someone else.
Okay, thank you. Also, since you believe that law school you pick is crucial to how you develop and your success, would you highly recommend in-person visits to law schools?
Oh, such a good question. Yes, but. And I say yes, but it can be expensive, and it depends on where you're looking. And so if you're looking at schools in a particular city or a particular region, and it's not difficult or impossible for you from a financial perspective to visit, absolutely. Because you can learn a lot about a school from a website. You can learn a lot about a school from, you know, the materials they send to you, but you don't really get to know about a place until you're there in person, interacting with people. That's when you start to get a feel for the place, the culture, the people. You have to feel it. And as I said before, you trust your gut, because you'll be surprised how many times you'll step foot on a campus to visit, and it doesn't take long before you realize, I don't think this is necessarily for me. And you can't ignore those feelings and those reactions, because you know, our bodies and our minds and our emotions start to trigger things to tell us, no, 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 this is not good. We may choose to ignore it, but if we allow ourselves to listen to what our bodies and our minds and our emotions are saying, you know if something is not the right environment. So it's hard to make that assessment if you don't have the ability to visit. With that said, if you're looking at schools in other areas and cost is an issue and you don't have the money or the time, quite frankly, to visit all of these schools, I highly encourage you to talk to current students. Don't just talk to the administration. Don't just talk to the folks looking at your applications. Talk to students and talk to them in an environment where they can answer the real questions. Ask them, what was it like when they first stepped foot on campus? Were they well received? Were they embraced? Were they accepted? You know, ask them about that transition onto that campus and how they felt. Ask them about how easily they made friends and how the interaction with their professors are. Ask them whether their professors know who they are or whether they're a number in a class, whether they have the ability to engage with the professor directly, or whether the only person they're really engaging with is the TA. One of the things I love about St. Joe's, you're engaged, and you're engaged with the people who are helping you develop. And so, you know, oftentimes young people focus on a name. You know, they focus on a school because it's got a certain cachet or because someone told them, oh, you should go there because it's ranked whatever. I'm not going to say that doesn't matter, because in some respects it does. But I'm a firm believer of what matters more is whether it's the right fit for you. Because if that school is the right fit for you, you're going to do well. And that's what matters. It's not about the name of the school or a rank. Is you can go to the #1 school, and if you're not happy and you don't do well, what's that done for you? So it really depends on what the right fit is.
All right, and I want to raise my hand and just say that thank you for saying that, because I think one of the things that we have trouble with in pre-law is convincing students that, for example, a school like NYU that has a dog-eat-dog, rip each other to shreds culture, which is awesome for some people.
Yeah.
I have a friend around the corner. She and her husband both went there. They loved it. I would die in such an environment. Right. And hearing you talk about your different experiences at all of your institutions and also how you run an institution, it's so clear that you've been making those choices. You've been like not letting that whatever colored light that would attract you to the place that would destroy you, that you found places where, I mean, the culture at Temple is not dog eat dog. It's right. Collaborative and supportive, and people don't rip things out of books so others can't find them. So thank you so much for saying that for our students, because I think the more people understand it's not about the name, it's about the fit.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right.
Okay. So now that you made it past law school, how do you allow your voice as a woman to come through in leadership positions at your firm that have been traditionally been male dominated? So are there ways your colleagues would describe your leadership style?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I think my colleagues would describe my leadership style as transparent. At least I hope they would, because I try very hard to be transparent. I want everyone to know what I'm thinking what I'm concerned about, what I think we need to do as an institution, areas where I think we have opportunities. So I try to be very transparent in terms of what I'm seeing, and I want people to talk to me. Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you disagree, why? What are you seeing that I'm not? Or am I looking at this a certain way and there's another perspective that perhaps I haven't considered? I don't think at all that leaders of any organization should take the position that, you know, I decide. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is really trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of the organization. And you can only do that when you're taking all perspectives into consideration with respect to those decisions. So being transparent, communicating well, which the most important part of communication is listening to people and understanding what their concerns and their perspectives are, and then trying to respond and address them. And so I hope that, you know, people would describe me as having been open and honest and transparent and trustworthy.
Okay. And what are your views on older students entering law school and coming out at age 50? Is it harder for that age group to be hired by a firm?
Not really. Well, I'll say maybe, but from my perspective, not really. So we live in a day and age now where lots of people are going into the law as a second, sometimes third career. They've had another career, you know, they've chosen to go down another path for whatever reason, and now they've set their sights on the legal profession. That shouldn't be a negative at all, because at the end of the day, what you're bringing is a perspective that perhaps other students don't have. You have a world perspective, a work experience perspective that others don't share, and that can add value. I think the only challenge that we all have, and it's not about age, it's about where we are in life. You know, I have a dear friend of mine who went to law school with us, and she was married with 2 kids. And she had decided to go to law school. And so, you know, while some students go in the evening, they're working a full-time job, they have a family, they're going to school at night. This particular friend of mine quit her job and decided that she was going to go to law school full-time during the day. And there were days when the kids came with her because they had to come with her. And so, you know, was it a little bit more challenging for her than it was for me? Absolutely, because she was at a different stage in her life than I was in mine. But she's practiced law and has been very successful and very happy. And so the fact that she was farther along in her personal life was not a negative for her at all. And so I tell anyone, don't be afraid to go to follow your dreams, pursue your passions. And it doesn't matter at what age it comes up. If it's something you want to do and you set your sights on it, do it. And don't let the fact that you're 40 or 50 or 60 or however old you are, don't let that stop you from pursuing something that you have a passion or an interest in.
Okay. And final question is, what's next for you after your tenure as president ends? And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Liebell because we're coming up on 5 minutes, but yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know. I will tell all of you, and I share this with my son. My son is a law school student now, so I'm a proud mom. He'll be graduating in the spring and coming home to practice, so I'm thrilled about that. But I tell him and I tell all young people, you should always leave yourself open to opportunities and possibilities because you never know where they're going to come from. You set your sights on a career, you might set your sights on a particular place where you want to work, and you might know where you'd like to be 5, 10, maybe 15, 20 years from now. But you don't necessarily know where every opportunity is going to come from. And if you keep yourself so narrowly focused that you don't keep yourself open to those opportunities, you might miss out on God's plan for you. Like I always say, the law was God's plan for me, but I don't know what his plan is, you know, once I reach a certain point. One of the things that's unique about my firm, when you're the managing partner, you don't step away from your practice. And so I've continued to maintain my practice while serving in this administrative capacity. So when my leadership role ends, I will still be very much engaged in my law practice, which I love, but I don't know what the future holds for me because I try to leave myself open to opportunities and possibilities. So I take my own advice from that perspective.
Doneene, I think the best way to end is that, is there something we didn't ask you that you want to say or share with us here?
You know, we talked about a lot, but you know, one of the things that I don't think people focus on as often as we should is the impact that our education has on us. I will tell you that, you know, my education at St. Joe's was critical. And it was critical, not just from one perspective, but from all perspectives. I mean, we started this conversation talking about the focus on the whole person. You know, Damon is Doneene Damon today because of not only all of her life experiences, but the education she received and the growth that she was able to go through during every step of that path. And so you all might not recognize it today, the impact and the positive impact that St. Joe's has had on you, but I guarantee you will recognize it at some point in the future. And you will realize that you are the person you are today because you had an education that didn't narrowly require you to focus on, you know, a particular nuanced area, but it focused on you as an individual, as a person, that you were in a community that helped you grow as a person, that helped you learn how to support others while others supported you. And you realize how important that is. And then you recognize the importance of that when you're looking at others coming behind you. So I would like to highlight for folks, don't take it for granted because not everyone is as blessed as we've been to have had the opportunity to have that personal growth, you know, by being a hawk. But, you know, you have to recognize the fact that you become who you are because of all of your experiences. And I know for me, St. Joe's was a huge part of that.
Doneene, I cannot thank you enough for this conversation on behalf of our students and faculty and alumni and staff who are all in this Zoom room, and on my own behalf, because I learned so much during this conversation, and my gears are turning, and I love that, and I hope everyone enjoyed it half as much as I did. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time out, and for everyone in the room who also adjusted schedules to be here today. I know you've all been on Zoom a lot, and I really appreciate you making this time. So thank you for coming sort of back to Hawk Hill, and we'll hope we'll get you in person when we're past this pandemic time.
Oh, I would love it. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thank you. And thank you, Susan, so much for introducing the program, for moderating the chat. I have many colleagues in many institutions that I work with who could not do such a job. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.